Welcome to the 1760 sessions, where we explore strategies and systems that actually drive growth. I'm Matt Reyes, principal at 1760 Strategic AI, and today's guest is Micah Logan, entrepreneur, speaker, Forbes contributor, and creator of the Small Business Mastery System, which has helped founders stabilize and scale their companies with measurable results. Micah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It is an absolute pleasure to be here in like-minded company.
Amazing. Really looking forward to this conversation, Micah. Let's start off with your journey and your origins. And so, going through your website, so that you've built fitness franchises, you've launched a number of new ventures. Tell me about, your journey and how you got here, and what lessons have shaped your philosophy.
Sure. I am a over 20-year entrepreneur. I never planned to be a 20-year entrepreneur when I was a kid. I grew up in one of the poorest, poorest towns in Boston. But I had two great parents, loving parents, set us on a good direction. But, growing up, there's no business coaches, you
Yeah.
know, in the hood.
Right. Yeah.
So there's no one specifically to say, hey, you should do this, and here are the ways that you do it. I just did what I thought was the right things, but largely over the time of my entrepreneurial journey, especially at the beginning, mainly I would say there was a lot of ignorance on my part. I just didn't know what I was supposed to do. I went to school for psychology, not for anything else, and I I thought that I could think my way, like most people who are quasi intelligent. You think you can think your way through things, and you'll be all right. But I was wrong because I learned after starting my first business that if you don't even know what question to ask to get an answer, a corrective answer, then you're going to be in a bad way, right? Thomas Sowell
Hmm.
says, the economist says that it takes a tremendous amount of or immense amount of knowledge to understand the extent of your own ignorance. So it really does require you to learn exactly what enough to try to ask a dumb question so you can get
Right.
a good answer, right? That was something I had to kind of like start with, and my first business failed. It was in the health and fitness industry. I closed that studio down. I remember I worked my butt off to get it open. I couldn't afford to have, a contractor come in there and even really build it out for me. I did all the build out myself. A few friends helped me, who had some trade skills, but I was spending 12 to 14 hours there a day for a month. And, I still failed, right? It was a, by any measure, a pretty simple place to operate, and I still couldn't make it run. So that meant that I needed to go back to the drawing board, which I did later.
Yeah,
So
tell me about your first venture. Let's talk about that more. What led you to start? What led you to start your that first studio, and what were some of the the biggest, I guess, takeaways from operating that eventually failing and having to close that down, and I guess how did you use that to fuel your next venture?
yeah, it's a good question. So basically, my takeaways were that I didn't know how to market effectively. I didn't know how to do market analysis to see if what I was offering was, even tangible for the area. I didn't do pricing analysis that is part of the marketing analysis. I didn't, of course, do a SWOT analysis of what I was bringing to the table, what I was good at. I knew I was good, but I didn't know
Yeah.
what the business I was starting was good at. In fact, I remember an interaction with another player in town who owned the gym in town. Like it was like one of those neighborhoods that have something like 30, 40,000 people, and so small town, and there's like
Hmm.
one main spot in town that people worked out at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And so I remember I got some press in the paper that I was opening. I was able to get a press release published, and the owner of that club, a woman, came down and was like, I'm just looking around to see kind of what the competition looks like. She kind of walked right in. I mean, I got to give her credit, man, because she had
Yeah.
to cojones to just walk in. But my place was small, and she didn't understand at the time that I was working on a 2020 something model in 2005, right? She
Yeah.
was, in my opinion, behind the game. But like my whole intent at the beginning was to open up a smaller, centric, membership focused, recurring revenue model back in 2005. You only hear about these models now,
Yeah. Yeah. Ahead of your time.
way ahead of my time. So she
Yeah.
walks in the front door, she looks around because it's intentionally small, and she says, I'm just here checking out the competition. And from the looks of it, there isn't any. And then she walks out. And I was like, okay, that's a bit of a dick move, but whatever,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
Yeah.
so, but I knew that she didn't have the vision that I had for what I wanted to
Yeah.
build. She didn't
Yeah.
understand it. And one of the lessons I learned there was it's okay to be different in business if you are filling what you perceive as a hole in the marketplace and there's a perceived need because you did market analysis and you understand the local buying environment. However, you should have your marketing tight to acquire those interested customers, right? Now, I didn't have
Yeah.
that tight at the time. I didn't know that I should have that specific market analysis super tight and, you know, like very acute at the time that I was building it. But I was way ahead of my time in understanding exactly what I thought the market could bear and what the market wanted and needed. Obviously now because there are whole health and fitness companies that had garnered billions of dollars of investment around a recurring membership model in a smaller space like Orange Theory, right? So like
Right.
obviously there are models out there that were going the route that I was going. I was a little too early. I didn't understand what I had at the time. If I did, I would
Right.
have marketed better and I would have marketed to the people who I thought wanted it a lot better.
Right. Right. And that, that really, that's, I think when you're too early to the game, I mean, that, it shows where, you know, having, another organization kind of show that model or build that out the proof of concept so you kind of understand because there is I think ultimately there is enough space to coexist
Oh,
and
it's a big
so
it's
I
a
think
big
that really
world, Matt.
helps the massive world exactly so after this first venture was your next venture in the same space? Did you try and, I guess, do it again in a different neighborhood, or was it completely out of the health and fitness space?
No, it was. It wasn't a health and fitness space. Actually, let me step back because you did ask me a question
Yeah.
I didn't answer, which was,
Oh,
what made me want to open up something like that, and it was because when I first got certified, I had like the tent poles we can say of what we might consider a business mind and
yeah.
business related skills. I was doing independent work and what we call now freelance work as a trainer at people's homes and
Right.
at health clubs. But I ended up becoming a manager for a boutique, smaller training concept that was a franchise, and I just realized that I had the unique ability to grow and manage a business. I turned around this business on behalf of the owners I worked for, who were in the process of trying to flip it, turn it around, and then flip it to someone else,
Yeah.
which they ended up doing. I got a sense that that was happening, so I left. But the time in between I came in, the time between they were looking to sell it, and I walked away. I turned around this business, and it was because I was able to understand the challenges that a business face with this specific one, and then make the right step by step decisions to turn it around. Now, I remember an interaction I had with one of the customers that were transitioning from the former ownership when the owners of that franchise purchased the one I was managing. One of the members came in who's a psychologist. We ended up becoming really good friends. And what he said to me was he had sat down across from me at a desk and, we're talking, and he was making life hard for me at the time, just purposefully making it hard to kind of see if I could handle the intensity of what it was going to be like actually running that specific studio. I didn't, he was playing a little bit of game for me. I knew that he was being kind of like hard for whatever reason, I didn't understand why, but it didn't really matter because, my goal was to turn around and preserve the business. So that's what I was going to do. And, at the end of that conversation, he said, "Hey, listen, I just want to let you know that this was a test for me." And he's like, I really wanted to push you. He's like, "You passed your test. I think you're going to do great." And that kind of like, the reason why I remember that over 20 years later is because it made me think that, if I could just leverage my ability to see beyond the present emotion of what's happening and understand the steps of how to turn around a business, then I might have something here. So, so I thought about that earlier. And then like I use those skills to kind of like push to the others, continue to push on. But after I closed that business down, you asked me initially,
Yeah.
secondarily about that, like what I did. I went to work for someone else because I needed a time to recalibrate my thinking. So
Yeah.
I became a corporate fitness manager for a big fitness, like a multi-state fitness company that had thousands of employees and hundreds of locations.
Right.
And what I did was I honed my ability to manage people and to understand people. And I was also tasked again with turning around a fitness department that hadn't hit in sales and revenue in years. And so I had over 30 employees, and I was tasked with kind of turning around the entire operation. So there were challenges there. I can go into those
Yeah.
later, but if you want, but that also helped me hone my skills when it came to managing people, expectations, and targeting, like kind of like setting my arrow at a certain target, kind of what I wanted to pursue in terms of numbers and KPIs and metrics to track. It was a great learning opportunity for that.
And how long did you do that before you decided to start your next venture?
So I did that for 2 years.
Yep.
So I hit for sales and revenue in June and July. And if you know anything about the fitness industry in Boston,
Mhm.
which is largely a college town, which is where this gym
Yep.
was, it was hard to hit for sales and revenue. And the club had to hit in sales and revenue any month, never let alone the two hardest months, June and July of the year. And we did both. But that was a test of everything I had, right? I had to fire the most popular trainer there who had the biggest book of business, because it turns out that one of the reasons why they had a book of business that they did was because they were stealing from the company. Now, for
Oh,
having
yeah.
the balls to be able to make that change, it just requires focus on what's on the other side of that, doing the right thing. And
Yeah.
then secondarily, there were like a lot of issues with staff backbiting and fighting. And if you know, listen, you may believe or not believe about ENTJs and Myers Briggs. I'm an
Mhm.
ENTJ.
Yeah.
I don't do politics. I don't do people politics. I don't do politics generally speaking. I value truth as a hierarchical value over everything else. So, in my opinion, like, why be a jerk if you don't have to? Just be honest. And so, what I used to do is I used to take the most difficult people on the staff. I would take their classes, right? So the group exercise class, I would take the class. I would be in the back. I would take the class. I would wear my uniform while they did it, so they could see me in the class. And I would take
Yeah.
to show them that I was showing up for them. But then at the end of that class, the person said to me, I'll never forget it. They said, "You're the first manager ever to take my class." And, she said that she appreciated it. And I said, "No problem." I said, "But, I do have a concern." I said, "One concern is that people find you difficult to get along with. Maybe you could tell me why that is." And then she said, "Well, I think that a lot of the other coaches don't know how to train," or it was some kind of like more derogatory way of seeing the rest of the staff. And I said, "Well, why don't you show them as opposed to being disgusted by what they're doing? Why don't you coach them?" I said, "If you don't feel like coaching them, you should keep your mouth to keep your comments to yourself. I'm trying to build a culture here that supports everyone, like I supported you,
Yeah.
right? But see, I supported her first
Yeah.
before I even did that. So, and she was receptive to that, but it's because I gave something first, something intangible, before I decided to correct her and to make a change when it comes to her attitude. And so she did. She appreciated what I was saying. She honored it. I was respectful to her, but I was also blunt with her, and I told the truth, and I think she respected that. And so I never heard a peep. And again, everything started turning around from there, and I started building the team that I wanted. So
Amazing.
yeah, so from there I got recruited to go to a private club to build their fitness department that they were just kind of starting from the ground up. It was a private club that had a lot of wealthy members, and I was there for about a year. So it was about, all in all, if you don't count some of the side, I was running my business part time this entire time,
Yeah.
while I was working what we call now a side hustle. It's like
Yep.
all
Yep.
these like new age terms that we use to describe, things that were just kind of commonplace. It was just two jobs back then, right? But like I was still doing that. So, and then eventually, like in about 2009, I decided to jump back in and start again.
Amazing. And was that in the health and fitness space as well, or a complete pivot?
During this period of time through 2020, 2020, it was all in the health and fitness space. And
Okay.
so,
Yeah.
I also spent my time between 2005 and then, well, when I closed my studio in 2000, end of 2006, to 2009 before I opened my own, I just spent myself just educating myself. I started reading all these business books that didn't have to do with fitness. I started crisscrossing the country, spending tens and tens of thousands of dollars, conferences, showing
Yeah.
up, asking questions, and I would be in line to talk to the people who were speaking. And I had a personal, just like a personal way of dealing with, presenters at conferences. I would say to myself, if I can only ask you one question, the highest and best, most intelligent question that I can muster, one question. I'm not going to waste your time. I want to ask you one. Then I would be satisfied. So I would spend, my time thinking about questions for every session that I would attend, and then when I would be refining my one question by the end of the presentation. So when I got up to the speaker, I would say, "Listen, I don't have a million questions for you, although and you don't have the time to answer a million questions. I have one question, and I have one question that I've been working on for a long time, and here it is." And I said, I just need a good, thorough answer. And I would ask that question, and I would get the answer to that question. I would go back to my hotel room. I wouldn't go Everybody else at these conferences would be going partying and drinking all
Yep.
that. Nope. I would be in my hotel room, and I would be taking the answer to that question, and I would be writing principles, business principles of my own. I used to bring a 3 ring binder,
Oh wow.
and I would just take those principles and I would kind of write them down, and I would study them, and I would think about why they would work, and I would literally spend 3 days thinking about why this stuff works and like what the impact could be.
Amazing. Can you share an example of, I guess one of these breakthroughs, one of these lessons that you learned from one of these conferences and how you applied it to your second studio and how I
So,
guess the results of that and everything.
ironically, one of the biggest lessons I learned didn't come from a question I asked. It came from listening to a presentation where there was an answer given based off of the experience of the presenter who had heard a lot of questions and made a lot of observations about businesses. And what he said was, at the end of your life, when you look back at it and you ask yourself, how did you make a difference? And was it all worth it? What are you going to say? How are you going to answer that question? And he went on to say that if failure doesn't happen close to the center, close to your chest, it happens way out here on the fringes. If
Yeah.
you're gonna fail anyway, why fail small? You need to fail big, massive. If you're gonna fail, right? Why only owe somebody $100? Owe someone $100,000, right? You're
Yeah.
gonna fail anyway. You're not gonna have the money anyway, so you might as well just go all out. And so
Yeah.
that kind of hit me, and it, you know, like I tried to think how big can I get without anyone knowing who I am.
Yeah.
I saw a question online one time, and you might appreciate this. Love to get your take on it too before I continue on. But it was, would you rather be, would you rather have fame or anonymity in the money? What do you say?
Oh, anonymity in the money for sure. But that's just my personality, and I think I'm very introverted. So yeah, personally anonymity. I can't say that word for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, it's all
I'd rather
good.
be anonymous. I'd rather be anonymous and have a lot of money for sure.
Right, and that was my answer. Right, so like I
Yeah.
would try to do things. I'm not an introvert, but I also kind of people wear me out a little bit. So like for me, like there's a lot, and plus there's a lot that goes with fame.
Yeah.
You know, so like I would rather I tried to build businesses by doing it quietly as opposed to having to step out and really kind of make an impact. And like I'm like I don't want articles and I don't want this and I don't want that. I just
Yeah.
kind of want to build the business quietly and like kind of be one of those guys.
Yeah.
Can't do
Yeah.
it, man. Like you have to build businesses where people are going to notice it, where more than one
Yeah.
person's going to notice it, and where people are going to come and buy and run to you, right? So you can't, I had to kind of get over that, and it took me a while to get over that because there's scrutiny that comes with putting yourself out there, right? That's why most people don't want to do
100%.
it. They don't want to. They don't want to sit there and be scrutinized by someone that tells them that they're wrong, they're stupid, they're an idiot, whatever the case is. But you can't control what people say. All you can control is what you know, what you've learned, and to put it out there. So I opened my next studio, um, and what I did was I decided to partner with a physical therapy clinic company, and then I opened three more studios in their clinics. So this time I have four locations, and then I had a fifth that I was opening up downtown. So like all of a sudden, like I took this singular studio concept and I kind of multiplied it by five.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
Small group training with recurring revenue and a staff to kind of deliver on it based off of solid programming. So I ran that. It went really well, and then the physical therapy clinic decided to close down their locations, so that kind of evaporated some of my locations, and then I added locations outside of there as well because they were starting to close theirs. So that's kind of how I was able to turn that around, and that was an interesting time period, and a very successful one.
What do you think was the biggest difference between your first go around with the studio in 2005 and this next one, other than, what you told me before around you didn't do market analysis, you didn't do SWOT analysis, etc. What was probably the biggest difference from, that first failure to, having this really successful second attempt?
I would say two things. First was my mindset because like if you ever I try to be quotable in the sense that like I like movies, so like remember the Titans, they say attitude reflects leadership when they were talking about how to play better on the team. And so I had to have a better quality of thinking about business, right? I had to think about, well, what is the best way for my business to run optimally and to perform on a regular basis without having major dips in revenue. So I had to make a mindset shift, and my mindset shift was specifically targeting the areas of my business that were previously under attack because I didn't pay attention to them, right? So marketing, staying ahead of their marketing as opposed to being proactive instead of reactive, making sure that you know what your message is, making sure that you understand what you do for your clients that moves the needle, and talking about what you do in a way that attracts people to you. So the second thing I did was starting to understand why my customers bought from me. Like that message, and I asked them specifically, why do you buy from me? A question that I had never asked before. And
Yeah.
by them answering why they bought from me, it helped me to kind of to distill down a message that I can use to attract other people who are looking to buy for the same reasons. So the biggest shift from the first time was my mindset when it came to ruthlessly executing my business on a daily basis first. And secondly, it came from understanding the language of my customer and their desires and what they wanted, why they actually traded money for our time and our services. Why did they do that?
Hmm. Amazing. And what was that transition like from, I guess you mentioned that you were in this, health and fitness space from 2005 to 2020. Or what was the transition like, and what was that moment to where you figured out you wanted to exit the space and do more of this, consulting work? And I'm assuming, what you've been doing for the past 5 years.
Yeah, so I sold my company in 2023, October 2023. So I had a really good run. It was a few things that kind of informed my ability to kind of shift gears, the first thing was that on average, I had an average CAGR, compound annual growth rate,
Hmm. Yep.
of 10% a year for over a decade.
Yeah.
That is crazy by any
Yeah.
metric. If you
That
worked
is
at
amazing.
Deloitte, then you know how crazy
Hmm.
that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not like 10%, like an extra $1,400. My business was growing by way more than that on a cash value basis. That's the first thing. Obviously, I knew what I was talking about because I actually did it. The second thing is that people start asking you questions. There's a saying out there that goes something approximating, if you're good, you tell people how good you are. If you're great, people tell you how great you are. People started to recognize my ability to run businesses. I won awards, so my business became an award-winning business, in addition to a revenue-generating business. And people started asking me questions about how to run businesses, and I would give them advice. Sorry, I have a mustache and the hair is like
Yeah.
falling in my mouth. Um, so like I started giving them advice, and my advice would work, and it actually moved the needle in business for people. And it was kind of like low hanging fruit things that I just kind of poo pooed as something simple that I just took that knowledge for granted. But when I shared it to them or with them, it turned their businesses around. You know, it made their businesses successful. I would see these acute spikes in whatever the challenge was that they were asking me about, and then the solution that I was able to provide for them. And when I would see these like acute spikes that they would just report back to me, I was like, oh man, that's pretty cool. And then fast forward to 2020, there was a startup that one of my clients was actually building, called Hushframe, which was a soundproofing company that manufactured a go-to-market new piece of soundproofing equipment, that where we're in the construction industry that hadn't had new innovation in soundproofing in over 2 decades, 25 years. And ironically, the client was used to listen to my podcast. Which she told me like eventually, like she listened to my podcast. I didn't know that she listened to it as regularly as she did, but she did. She listened to it quite regularly. And then, like I said, well, and she would ask me about business because they're trying to launch a project. What did you think? What do you think? And I would tell them. And then, I sat down. I said, look, why don't we just carve out some time? I'll sit down with you. You give me what the plan is, and then I'll just try to see what I think of the most hot button issues are. Because they couldn't get traction. They'd only sold like maybe $20,000 to $30,000 worth of these things. And I was like, well, let me just carve out some time and kind of figure out what you need to do. We sit down. I explained to them what I saw, what I think that they needed to do, and at the conclusion I came to was that there was a lot of disjointed execution, lack of vision on the go to market side, and they needed a strategy for all that stuff, and they needed a field marshal to kind of marshal all the resources and ideas together to kind of package it and put it together. So I said, you all need a CEO. That's what that sounds like, right? It sounds like
Yeah.
CEO.
Yeah.
I probably could have asked you that. You probably would have told me. My bad. I should have asked. But yeah, and I was like, yeah, like at the end of the day, you need someone to kind of direct this stuff. So they were like, well, do you want to? She was like, well, would you mind doing it? And then my first answer was no. Like I was like, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Not interested. And then she was like, come on, please, like, please. And I was like, well, let me think about it. Let me think about it. So I thought about it, and I came back and I said, fine. I'll fractional CEO, like I'll do it, right? Like that's how I'll function. So I worked with the company, 2020, and then we just started making improvements that I thought were the best improvements to make. And then everything started to snowball. Revenue started going up. Chips, introductions, products started spreading. I developed a go-to-market plan. I developed a go-to-market messaging and strategy, how it should be deployed, trying to increase distribution. Like there was a lot of things to do. And for me to understand the absolute insanity, which is the construction industry, which is a bunch of people who are quite masculine, but at the same time was quite insecure over things that challenge their ability to think their way through problems, right? So it's kind of like that's interesting to me. How do I reconcile that? So like it was just my ability to take a completely separate business that had nothing to do with health and fitness, and to increase both the revenue, the distribution. Like I mean, I didn't have distribution issues. I had distribution issues. I didn't have a product based business. I had a service based business, and so I had to think my way through distribution and supply chain. And obviously, we know what happened in 2020 that disrupted all of those things, right? I had to kind of figure out that piece too. So like, then it kind of just dawned on me that shoot, I'm pretty good at this business thing, whether it's service, a product. Um, we were distributing in 4 states. I can tell you, 2025 now, we're up to all 50 states. We have international distribution, and we just closed a distribution deal with an arm of our company for Australia and New Zealand. I went down and I negotiated with the Fortune 35 company, Lowe's Home Improvement down in Charlotte. I got us into Lowe's. So I started kind of seeing things and business principles that I can kind of roll out. Started tracking KPIs. I kind of started pushing certain marketing messaging, strategic partnerships. Like there was a lot of stuff that went from their $20,000 to $30,000 in 4 states to us being in over 50 states international, and $500,000 in revenue just 5 years later.
Are you still currently, I guess the fractional CEO for the same company?
I am. I am.
I'm curious, Mike, how do you balance all your time with this, your other, all your ventures? Like what does your day look like in terms of, your I guess everything. It's so fascinating because I think one thing that stood out for me over, the last 30 minutes, just how many different ventures you've had, how many different experiences. And I guess how all over the how all over the map you are. And so I find it really fascinating is how does someone juggle all of these all of these different activities?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it can be difficult sometimes, especially when they all have demands at the same time.
Yeah.
And so how I juggle them is number one, you're only as good as the team that you put in place, and each one of these initiatives, these businesses have good teams in place. I work with really good people who can
Yeah.
help out and can take the message, can take the direction and run with it and apply their special sauce to it, and work within the guidelines of kind of what I put out there, and to make it continue to push and make it into something. The second way I do it is like I try to not procrastinate on things I have to do, try to get things done as quickly as possible, so I don't have that lingering, oh, I should have done that like a few days ago. And fourth, honestly, it's because I have a certain set foundation of business principles, first order business principles that drive my how I think about business, and I think it works with every business. So it doesn't. So the business is kind of like a widget, right? It's kind of interchangeable. Like it doesn't really matter what
Hmm.
business it is. If I
Yeah.
work within this framework of first order business principles, then I can apply this to anything that I do.
Yeah.
Um, which kind of led me to thinking about, when I got into consulting on a more regular basis back in 2023 after I sold my company. So yeah, like I mean, it's something that's kind of how I organize myself. First order, rapid response, rapid implementation, because the faster you implement, the faster you learn. And then I have great teams. I live by my calendar like most other people who are highly
Hmm.
busy. Um, but you're right. How do I do all this within 24 hours? Is ruthless execution, lack of procrastination, and getting people around me who can deliver on the program that I create.
And how many businesses are you involved with currently?
Three.
Three. Okay. And they're all separate work streams, or is there a connective tissue between them?
Well, there was just recently a connective tissue through one. Like so, for instance, the Hush Frame soundproofing company. I'm still with them. I started last September a construction firm. Has nothing to do with Hush Frame. It's its own kind of independent firm. So I guess you could say maybe it's a little different there. And then I have the consulting business as well. And then I write for Forbes. And then I mean, I guess technically, I'm in the real estate game a bit too, but and I have my own podcast. So like, yeah, I mean, I'm really busy. And how can I manage all this stuff? Is I take it one issue at a time.
Yep. Yeah. So, Micah, tell me a bit. I want to talk a bit about your consulting business. I think we talked a bit off air about how, we kind of are doing similar things. How did you, what was your first start into consulting? How did you get into it? And, you know, what are some of your biggest, I guess, lessons that you've learned since you started consulting?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess technically my first foray into consulting was the what we now call fractional CEO, but that was kind of more a lot more consulting, especially at the beginning, than it was anything else.
Right. So that was the gateway into you starting your own consulting firm.
Yeah, yeah, I think
Yeah.
so because I realized that the techniques that I was using were marketable and they actually worked in businesses outside of the industry that I was in. To me, the litmus test is does your advice work across more than one industry?
Hmm.
And if it does,
Yeah.
then you might see some success there. And then I had success advising briefly an HVAC company. That's in construction, a business in the death care industry, a business in the education industry, in a service based cleaning business. That was kind of my start, and then a a custom sign manufacturing firm. Some of these people are still clients of mine. Some of them are not. But that was kind of like my list of accounts, and they all had success across the board to some degree, right? Like success in consulting is only as good as the implementation that
Yeah.
the company is going to put in. I mean, from working with Deloitte and other firms, you could come up with a strategy, and then what ends up happening is a lot of these firms have a $2 million 3 ring binder of execution materials, and it just kind of sits there as
Yeah.
a paperweight, right? They don't.
Exactly. Yeah. The strategy means nothing if the execution isn't there to match and the go to market isn't there to match.
It's just ink on paper.
It's just words. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So like for me, like getting into consulting, it was kind of like I can really make a big difference in small businesses. I can really
Yeah.
help them to get over the hurdles. My focus is in helping businesses do two things: turn around and then create scale for the business, whatever that is. No matter whatever that exists independently of the exit plan, right? So if their exit
Yeah.
plan is to sell, if their exit plan is to just close the doors and make as much money as they can, my goal is to take the business and help them turn it around if they're kind of barely treading water, and then create scale from that. And that requires both an attitude change, a business giving over themselves to me a little bit and in a non-religious way, and kind of helping them to find that they do have the resources. Like honestly, most small businesses have the resources. They may not have the money, but they have the resources today, especially with the materials that are available to small business owners today, more so than ever before. I mean, you do a lot with AI and consulting.
Yeah. I
I
do.
mean,
Yeah.
there's such low cost ways to create maximum leverage for small
Yep.
businesses now that
Yeah.
it's
There
it's
are.
crazy. It's so it is a fraction of the cost would be too generous for how low a cost it is to implement these things that would in the past cost millions of dollars. And you could probably explain that way more than I could. It's less than a fraction of the cost. It's minuscule the cost that's associated with doing really big things. And so I help kind of uncover what the resources are for small businesses, but also try to help them understand how to use those resources. That's where small business mastery comes from. It
Yeah.
comes from the fact that we have these ideas, we've read the books, we've talked to people, and we have a certain way where we think that we should conduct business, but the skills that are required to conduct the business just need to be refined, right? And so it's the evolution of the E-Myth. So I consider what I do the successor to the E-Myth. I think the E-Myth set a generation of businesses on the path, maybe more than one generation on the path. I think that what I'm doing now is kind of an evolution of that, which is refining those skills, making them specific, and addressing those skills to attending to the biggest issues in businesses by nurturing those skills and helping upskill small business owners.
Could you share an example of a client case in which you've applied these frameworks, the small business mastery and some of the other frameworks that, that are on your website, for example? Just a case where you've produced a measurable breakthrough, and what did that look like? What did you implement? Anything you can talk about there?
Sure, I had a client in the death care industry. Their biggest issue was they had had a lead. Well, let me step back. There were there were multiple issues. Like, as you know, in consulting, you step in for one issue and there ends up being
Yeah,
like five different issues,
for
maybe
all,
10,
yes, yes.
right? So you're like, okay, so there's 10 different issues to address, and then you have to rank order the issues in order of importance to address. So after you rank order the issues in importance to address, then what you uncover is what are the most hot button issues in the business that need to be addressed in terms of implementation today, right? And then what can wait if we to triage these issues and turn them into a kind of essentially a traffic light of issues, a red, yellow, green. Red meaning immediate, today to 1 week, yellow being a week beyond 1 week, 1 to 4 weeks, and then green being kind of 4 weeks and can wait a little bit. If you were to triage some of those issues and rank order them and triage them, then what you'll find is you can start to uncover kind of some of the issues. So what I do is, one part of my framework is called the turnaround framework. Turnaround is the 10 steps I believe that kind of like just kind of make that U-turn with the business. So the first thing is triaging cash flow, just making sure that you can address the immediate cash flow issues. Without cash flow, businesses are dead.
Yeah.
You cannot operate without cash flow. So you have to analyze what the cash flow issues are first. So I was working with this business in the death care industry, and they hadn't had a lead in 12 months. And the reason why was because they were so content with the recurring revenue that they were getting
Right.
from their existing client base.
Right. So they weren't growing at all or finding new customers. Yeah.
They weren't finding new customers. In what world can a business survive long term with existing customers that without filling that bucket long
Yeah.
term? That is not a good strategy. That's a strategy of hope, because you're hoping that these people never cancel. That's really what it is. All right, because if they cancel, you're screwed, man. Right? Like
Yeah.
you have no. So what we did was we said, okay, well, let's address filling the bucket first. Right? You have other major issues, and the second one was kind of like a 1A versus a 2, but the first issue was, let's address the lead issue. What are you doing for generating leads? That's an easy answer. The answer is nothing. So let's address that one first. So we put together a basic template for how the business owner could work to get leads. So I would ask, what initiatives have you pursued in the past that have been the most successful at generating leads for you? Okay, and then I would listen to their answer, and then I would respond with, well, why aren't we doing these at least once a day, right? So
Yeah.
setting expectations for how they need to work on a daily basis to get leads into their company was something that we had to do. Prioritizing the daily activity, prioritizing where they focus their daily time, and so we focused on engaging in those client building activities every day for a set period of time. So that was one of the first things that we did. Second thing that we did, the 1B issue, as I mentioned earlier, was that they were leaking revenue in a bunch of different places, right? So now we're filling our bucket with leads, but the secondary issue is that there's a hole in the boat, and the boat is kind of going underwater, right? So like, what do we do to address those issues? Well, one of the things that we do to address those issues is we plug the hole. Like, obviously, right? You can't row a boat on the middle of the ocean with a hole. You're going to be underwater. So we started looking at where can we reduce cost. I come in and I think two things: increase revenue, reduce costs. I mean, in consulting, that's 101. Like, you know that.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's like
Yep.
day one in Deloitte. They probably have a PowerPoint where they sit you down and they say increase revenue, reduce costs are our two tentpoles, our foundational structures. Right? So that's what we did. So we were able to reduce his costs, his revenue by 37%. Not his revenue, excuse me. We were able to reduce his expenses by 37%, while simultaneously increasing his leads by 1,800%, because I mean, that number means nothing
Yeah,
because
it went from
it was
zero to
zero, right?
exactly 0 to 18.
So the cash value of that, I can tell you, was about $3,500 a month. And so for a large business, that's maybe one customer, but for a small business, that's real money, right? So it was like he started gaining thousands of dollars a month in actual revenue between 2,500 and 3,500, depending on the month, right? For like the first 90 days of that was like
Yeah,
1,200, then it went up to 2,500, then it went to 3,500, while simultaneously cutting expenses 37%. That is a recipe for winning, right? At least that's a start. Um, and what he was able to do there was kind of start to see the forest from the trees. You get a little bit more comfortable and less kind of anxious. But he was still kind of mounting debt. So we started talking about how he can attack the debt, his short-term liabilities that he had, because short-term liabilities are really what sink you. Long-term liabilities are hard, right? But the problem with long-term liabilities is you can often amortize them over a long period of time without kind of crippling your business. The short-term liabilities are kind of like an anchor around your neck. So can you renegotiate some of those and turn them into long-term, right? Or get something approximating a long-term liability structure. And so we kind of started working on that. And then what we did was we kind of redirected his focus on being more marketing and sales oriented, and as opposed to being focusing on, he's a creative. So the issue with creatives sometimes are that they focus on the beautification of their product, and they want everyone to appreciate the beauty of their product as much as they appreciate creating the beauty. The issue with that is, as you can imagine, is that you have to sell the beauty to people, right? Like you still have to kind of find the people who are going to find it beautiful, who are going to appreciate the beauty. So you have to kind of like go out there and cultivate it. So, what we did, we started kind of working on his mindset around becoming a marketer and being sales oriented and being an executive, being ruthlessly focused on controlling and maintaining costs and running a lean business, right? Using lean management principles to kind of run his business. The result of that was stabilizing his business, increasing leads, dramatically decreasing expenses, and putting him on the path to profitability.
that's amazing. That's amazing. Well done, Micah. I'm curious now. We're coming to the almost at the top of the hour, and there's one area that I'd love to talk about before we wrap the podcast up, and that's around AI. I'm just curious, especially in all your ventures, whether that's as a consultant or as fractional CEO. How are you using AI today? And I guess what's your perspective on it, and I guess the future of business, small business in particular, with AI?
I think it's crucial. I wrote a LinkedIn article, which was one of the last ones before I got recruited to Forbes, about the diffusion of AI into business operations and why it's so important to embrace it, appreciate it, but at the same time put guardrails up that are
Yeah,
both ethical and structured. Right? I mean, I think of AI, generally speaking, from a resource level, as a business executive and a consultant, as labor. And I think that the best way for me to understand the diffusion of AI is in the labor sector, and to keep it as labor capital. And how would you manage labor around the issues in your business? So you got to think of it as like a highly intelligent labor force that you normally would have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to have that in your company. How can you deploy it to actually to fit your needs? If AI was an employee to work in your business, that employee will cost you about $350,000 a year for that level of brain trust as a small business, and you couldn't afford that employee, but now you can for, again, we talk about the fractionality of the cost of these resources for nearly nothing, right? For like the cost of a cup of coffee or whatever, maybe a couple cups of coffee depending on where you go.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but to me, like, I think that is the framework in which with which small business owners need to understand AI. They need to, in my opinion, embrace it. They need to find a mixture of how to maintain the human element so that they don't bastardize their offering and make it less attractive to people who are across older generations. I think the people who will capture the attention of multiple generations, both the one coming up and the ones that are older, are the people who have the ability to tie in the human element with AI. Let me explain what I mean. So I started a construction company, as I previously mentioned. One of the things that we do is we have an office, we have a operations manager. That operations manager answers the phone between 9 and 5, or eight and five, really. And outside of the 8 and 5, we have an AI receptionist. So you call up, the AI receptionist then introduces itself, and it tells you, and it gives you a list of um, fundamental business service offerings that we have, and it will bring you through prompts till you get to a human to speak to again. What we don't do is we don't keep a person in the cycle of AI until they get frustrated because they don't know how to manage it, or they're not
Yeah.
talking to a person. We set the expectation that the human interaction is coming up again, right? So I think that there has to be a plug in between the AI and the human element. I think
Yeah.
small business owners understanding like what's happening, not just automations in business, but with AI agents is going to be critical in the next evolution of how businesses
Hmm.
can actually function. And let me tell you something: AI agents are going to, well, it, they're going to dramatically decrease the workforce. I get it, but what they're going to dramatically do is increase profitability in companies
Yeah.
by an enormous margin. Like this essentially for white collar small businesses, it really does flip it flips the game around. But you do have to have in any customer service related role, in my opinion, you have to have a human on that
Have
end.
to. Have to.
Like that is a company that can get the balance between human touch and AI agent and automation and linking those things together are going to be the companies that are the companies that win awards and the companies that have the highest level of NPS and customer satisfaction.
Yeah, 100%. I think to that point, I think, companies that really prioritize the human intelligence aspect and leverage artificial intelligence to scale that without losing that human touch, I think are the ones who are going to be successful with AI. And, not become one of these companies that's over reliant on AI and still have, their, their unique value proposition that they're giving to their market.
Yeah, and let's talk about one aspect of AI that we always talk about job replacement. What we don't talk about is the part of AI. I think to me, there's two faces to AI. The first one is one that can accomplish tasks for you and maybe do some interaction with customers. The second one is that you can just create a robust way of internal staff learning and education and answers to queries and things in companies that a person would otherwise have to try to figure out for a large part of time what the answer is. And so it's not just about interacting with customers, it's also about the fact that your employees can get the answer to questions in seconds as opposed to it taking days to get back. What does that do to your customer service? By them saying, hold on, if you could hold on for a minute, let me get the answer of that to you, versus saying, well, let me call you back, or let me kind of circle back to this conversation in like 3 days. Like to me, like that goes to the whole book, ignore your customers and they'll go away. That like by you never saying no to a person, but actually trying to find ways to actually help them out with whatever their query is, like it really does kind of set you on a path to like really your customer service ability becoming exponentially better.
Agreed. Could not agree more. Well, Micah, it's been a really interesting conversation. I could speak for hours with you about this. It's been really fun learning about your journey and everything you're doing. And, I guess any last remarks or things you'd love to plug before we sign off?
Sure, two things to plug. The first one is I would love for anyone who's listening to sign up for my free weekly newsletter. It's called Small Business Mastery. It comes out every Tuesday. There will be one today, and that newsletter just talks about the skills of business, like cultivating those skills. We address topics every single week, how to implement them. Because what I've learned in consulting and business, generally speaking, is that it all comes down to implementation today, like how you can implement today to be successful long term and not waiting. Don't put things on the shelf, right? So it really kind of delves into the actual specific skills of building businesses. And sometimes I'll expound on other topics. And then the second thing is I'm writing a book, my first book, that is kind of respectfully titled "You Should Quit," and it's about turning around your business.
Yeah,
Absolutely. You know, initially it was titled "Turnaround," and then I decided to go something a little bit more controversial.
amazing. Well, I'm excited to read that. And when's that come out?
Well, I'm still writing it. It's supposed to be out this fall, so I'm thinking maybe late fall. I should be.
Okay,
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, so that's pretty soon. Awesome. Well, Micah, thank you so much. Yeah, everyone that's listening, please sign up for the Small Business Mastery newsletter that's out every Tuesday. I'm sure you'll learn a lot. Yeah, it's been a really fantastic conversation, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
thank you.